My name is Brielle Cross. I'm 27 years old, and this is not fiction, it's my real story. A story drenched in secrets, blood, and a revenge that consumed my very soul. What started as a tragic family accident unfolded into a haunting conspiracy that would change the course of my life. My name is Brielle, and I've been quiet long enough. If you're into raw truths, buried lies, and the kind of vengeance that has no return, then stick with me. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share to support more real stories like this. This story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries. I was 13 the day my father's body was found face down in the shallow end of Lake Blackamore. They called it an accident. The authorities didn't dig deeper than a statement, a signature, and a zipped-up body bag, and my family. They just moved on like silence was some kind of inheritance. But even at 13, I knew something wasn't right. My father, Peter Cross, was not the kind of man who slipped too, tripped, or who accidentally drowned. He was strong, calculated, a respected prosecutor in Denver, who put monsters behind bars and made enemies of people who smiled with knives behind their backs. I remembered his hands, always cold, always steady, and how he used to say, "Justice isn't blind, Brielle. It just hides in the dark until someone drags it into the light." After his death, my family fell apart in quiet ways. My mother, Judith, never smiled again. She never said his name, never wore black, never even visited his grave. My older brother, Caleb, began to withdraw into himself, and by the time he turned 20, he was gone. No forwarding address, no goodbye. Just vanished. And then there was me, 13, angry, haunted, growing up with questions that no one would answer. I spent the next decade chasing shadows. I became a criminal psychologist, obsessed with understanding the minds of people who killed, who lied, who smiled while burning things down. And I never stopped asking, why? Did my father die like that? The whisper I couldn't shake came back every night. He didn't fall, someone pushed him. Then came the letter. It arrived the week before my 27th birthday. No return address, just my name, Brielle Cross, written in a shaking, almost childlike script inside a single sentence printed on yellow paper. He didn't drown, he was silenced. There was something else, a photo, old, blurry, but unmistakable. My father standing beside a man I had never seen before. Gray suit, silver cufflinks, and the kind of smile that made your stomach twist. My father had written something on the back of the photo in his neat, all caps handwriting. "If anything happens to me, look at Stonehall." I didn't know what Stonehall was. A place? A company? A person? That night, I stayed awake until 4 a.m. and searched through every inch of my father's old briefcase, the one I'd kept hidden under my bed for years in a false lining. I found a second envelope, brittle with time. It contained a USB drive and a list of names. At the top of the list was one I recognized, Clayton Barrick, a retired senator, a family friend, a man who gave a toast at my father's funeral. That's when I knew this wasn't just a tragedy. This was a setup, a betrayal, a crime that had been buried so deeply someone was willing to kill to protect it. So I packed a bag, left Denver, and flew to a place I hadn't been in 14 years, Stonehall, a small private estate in upstate New York, once owned by Barrick's family. It was no longer on public records, but my father's GPS logs on the USB drive had led me there. Place was a tomb, abandoned, overgrown, silent, but inside the rotting mansion were files, old files, my father's handwriting all over them, photos, documents, court transcripts, a secret legal case, a whistleblower, and one phrase repeated over and over again. Project Elmsworth. At night, someone tried to kill me, barely escaped through the basement. A man in a black coat, military posture, no hesitation, broke through a side window with a silenced gun. He didn't speak, didn't ask questions, just aimed, and at moment as I fled through the woods behind Stonehall, my body, bruised lungs, burning heart, thundering with fear, I felt something cold settle into my spine. This wasn't about closure, this was worse. Morning after I barely escaped Stonehall, I found myself in a rundown motel outside Albany, New York. My clothes were torn, my arm bruised from where I'd hit the ground, and my phone fried. Whether it was water impact or deliberate tampering, I didn't know. But someone was tracking me, and they were more prepared than I had imagined. I took out the crumpled list of names my father had left. Most were scratched out in red pen, which told me one of two things. They were either already dead or they had turned. Only 3 names remained untouched: Clayton Barrick, Dr. Eva Langley, and someone called Dame Maddox Barrick. I remembered from childhood. Slick smile, polished shoes, always smelling of tobacco and expensive lies. Eva Langley was a stranger, but her name came with a hospital address from 15 years ago. Sienna Mental Research Institute closed in 2010. Maddox? No details, just a note. He owes me, he knows. That was it, and yet something in my gut told me Maddox would be the key. I rented a car under a fake name, and drove south back into the quiet parts of Pennsylvania. There was a house listed under Eva Langley's name until 2009, and I needed to see if she'd left anything behind. What I found chilled me. The house was abandoned, covered in dust and mold, but the basement had a locked metal cabinet with rusted hinges and a bullet hole in the side. Inside were dozens of tape cassettes, all labeled with dates and patient codes. One name was repeated over and over again. Subject 117, Project Elmsworth. I didn't know who Subject 117 was, but the way her voice trembled through the recordings, it wasn't just science, it was guilt. This is Dr. Langley, day 79. Subject 117 is deteriorating. Memory fractures, repetitive phrase loops, possible trauma exposure, requesting removal from trial. No reply from Barrick. Someone please tell Peter Cross to pull his daughter from this. I froze. His daughter? Was Subject 117 me? My hands trembled as I fumbled to play another tape. Day 94. Subject 117 is no longer responsive. They administered phase 3. I didn't agree to this. If anyone finds these tapes, they're rewriting minds, they're erasing pain. Yes, but at a cost, Peter. If you hear this, they will come for you next. And just like that, every scattered image in my head, the blackouts, the dreams, the strange smells I remembered from childhood flashed like broken film. I wasn't chasing my father's mystery. I was part of it. They did something to me, had been a patient, a test subject. My father tried to stop them, and they silenced him. I pocketed every tape I could and drove back to New York, this time to Manhattan, where Senator Barrick's office still operated, though he'd retired from public life. I posed as a journalist. Easy enough. Men like him never suspect a woman in heels asking soft questions with a notebook. When I mentioned my father's name, his smile faltered just slightly enough for me to know that the past still haunted him. I leaned in and whispered, "He left something behind, Senator, something he didn't want you to find." He laughed it off. Said Peter was a good man, but paranoid. You know how those crusaders get. Crusaders. That word stuck in my throat like poison, but the real moment of horror came when I showed him the photo. The one from the anonymous envelope. His face turned to stone. He didn't deny it. He didn't blink. He simply said, "You shouldn't have come back, Brielle." And then his assistant entered with 2 coffee cups, too soon, too smoothly, and I understood. I didn't drink the coffee. I left without a sound. I knew I had minutes, maybe less, before someone followed. Sure enough, as I turned down 5th Avenue, a black SUV pulled into traffic behind me. I ducked into the subway, changed directions twice, and slipped into a hotel lobby where I paid cash for a room on the 10th floor. And that's when I found the message taped to the inside of the bathroom mirror. "Dane Maddox is watching. You're not alone." No signature, just a phone number. I called it from a burner cell. He answered on the first ring, a voice like sandpaper and steel. "You're late, Cross. I met him that night in a graveyard outside Yonkers, because of course where else would a man like Maddox operate? He was in his 50s, trench coat, ex-military, energy, one eye slightly dimmed from an old injury, and he knew everything. He told me my father had tried to expose Project Elmsworth nearly 2 decades ago after discovering that the psychological trial had veered into something called M-Care Store, a brain-altering experiment meant to erase trauma in children of government whistleblowers, but it didn't erase it, rewired. It turned grief into compliance, pain into fog, memory into static, and the funding came from private defense contractors led by Barrick. I had been patient. Zero. My father had taken me out when he found out. Langley tried to cover it, but by then it was too late. The damage was done. My memories, my emotions, all manipulated. Why now? I asked Maddox. Why am I remembering things? Because they didn't finish the job, he said. Your father saved a backup of you before they wiped too much. He gave it to someone who kept it safe, and now they want to destroy it before it leaks. Who has it? He didn't answer. Instead, he gave me a location. Brooklyn Dock 14, Tuesday midnight. Bring a gun. That was 3 days from now. 3 days to uncover the full truth. 3 days to prepare for war. 3 days to remember who I really was before they stole me. And as I walked away from that graveyard, tapes in my bag and fire in my veins, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't just going to expose them, I was going to destroy them. Wind hit hard as I stood near Brooklyn's Dock 14 that Tuesday night, the East River glinting under the low hung moon. Midnight was minutes away, and every step toward that warehouse felt like I was crawling deeper into my father's grave and further into the truth. I had the cassette tapes in my backpack, a small revolver tucked in my jacket, and Dame Maddox's last words echoing in my head. Bring a gun, trust no one. I didn't trust anyone anymore, not after what I'd heard on those tapes not after remembering flashes of my childhood. That felt more like nightmares than memories. There was a room sterile and white. A woman's voice asking me if I missed my mom, a burning sensation behind my eyes, a metal chair wires screaming. Not mine, someone else's. The moment I stepped into the warehouse, I saw the silhouette. He was standing under a hanging light, back straight, arms crossed. Dane Maddox. He wasn't alone, a man in his late 60s stepped forward from the shadows, briefcase in hand, tall clean suit, an old scar running down his jaw. He introduced himself only as Roth, and he had the backup portable hard drive sealed in titanium casing, everything Nor father smuggled out of Elmsworth is in here, Roth said. Not just your records, everyone's, the test subjects, the trial phases, the neural maps. The original funding contracts, even the signatures, enough to bury everyone involved. Maddox handed it to me, heavy, cold, and I held in my hands the death certificate of men like Barrick, but nothing good stays good for long. Just as I was tucking it into my bag, the sound of tires screeched outside the warehouse. I caught the glint of assault rifles under floodlights and knew they'd found us. I ran for cover behind a forklift while Maddox drew a weapon and returned fire. It wasn't chaos, it was precision, a kill team I'd seen government-trained units before in footage. This was clean, efficient. Meant to leave no survivors. Roth was shot first, one bullet through the neck, and he collapsed without a sound. Maddox took two to the shoulder before yelling at me to run. I didn't look back. I escaped through a loading dock, climbed down a chain link fence, and disappeared into a construction site. Across the lot, I buried the hard drive inside a broken concrete mixer and kept moving. Hours later, I was on a bus to D.C. covered in dust, heart still racing, blood on my hands that wasn't mine. When I reached the Capitol, I went to the only person who might still be clean. Monica Voss, a former investigative journalist who'd been blacklisted years ago for publishing a piece about government mind experiments in the early 2000s. I told her my name. She slammed the door, but when I handed her one of the tapes, Langley's voice trembling in guilt, she let me in. We spent the night listening, cataloging, decoding. What we uncovered wasn't just a cover-up, it was a blueprint Microstore had evolved into Neurocrate, a next-gen behavioral programming initiative backed by private contractors and military partnerships. Their goal: create emotionally dulled assets, from trauma victims, disposable, loyal, and unaware, the children of enemies, defectors, whistleblowers, all turned into blanks. I was their first success until my father rebelled. Barrick had ordered his death personally. And worse, he was trying to bring the program back. With Monica's help, I crafted a plan. We wouldn't just leak the files, we'd bring down every investor, every senator, every executive involved. It had to be slow, surgical, devastating. But first, we needed to retrieve the drive I buried. I returned to Brooklyn a week later. This time, Maddox was gone. No messages, no signal, nothing. Maybe he was dead, maybe he ran, but the hard drive was still where I'd left it, and within a day, Monica and I had set up a secure server in an underground bunker owned by one of her hacker contacts. We began releasing files piece by piece to a global network of journalists and whistleblower sites. First came the funding ledgers, proof of how Project Elmsworth was paid for using black money filtered through shell charities. Then came the internal memos, the termination lists, the patient logs. The world began to pay attention, but we hadn't even gotten to the worst part. The next folder was labeled Cross Variant. It held over 200 hours of footage of a young girl, me sitting in a white chair, eyes wide, voice whispering strange lines I didn't recognize. Some sessions were dated before my father's death, others after, which didn't make sense until I watched the final tape. The date read January 8th, 2012, 3 weeks after my father's funeral. In the video, I sat upright, unblinking. A man behind the camera asked, "Do you remember Peter Cross?" I shook my head. He asked, "What is your name?" I replied, "Subject 117 Unit." "Echo," the man said, "and your mission?" I smiled and answered, "Eliminate the threat." I dropped the hard drive and backed away from the screen because it hit me. They didn't just experiment on me, they used me. Now I had no idea what I had done, who I had hurt, what commands had been buried deep inside me. Had I killed? Had I been their weapon? The final tape ended with a log note: Cross Variant successfully deployed, awaiting next phase, reintegration. I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was chasing redemption, and maybe a way to stop myself from becoming exactly what they built me to be. 3 weeks after releasing the first files, the world began to shudder. Names were being whispered in congressional halls. Journalists who had once laughed off conspiracy now looked over their shoulders. The phrase Project Elmsworth began trending not on public platforms, but in encrypted forums, darknets, and classified channels. And in the middle of it all stood me, Brielle Cross, not just the daughter of a murdered prosecutor, not just a damaged mind stitched back together by trauma. No, I was the key they thought they buried, the weapon they built, the ghost they lost control of, but I remembered now, not everything, but enough. Enough to finish what my father started, enough to burn the whole thing down. The final tape was our blueprint. It revealed the truth that haunted me the most. I had been used as a tool to silence 3 witnesses before my father pulled me from the program. Their deaths had been ruled accidents just like his. It wasn't just theory, it was documented blood on my hands. Even if I was just a child, even if I was brainwashed, it was still me. I had been the gun, they had just pulled the trigger, and that guilt, that knowledge became my fuel, Monica, and I launched the final phase of our operation. We leaked the Cross variant footage. I attached my own recorded statement, face visible, names spoken clearly. I told the world I was a test subject. I told them what they did to me, and then I gave them every name. Clayton Barrick, Eva Langley, the board members, the contractors, every single name. I didn't blur faces, I didn't censor files. This time justice wasn't going to be polite. Within 48 hours, chaos ignited. Barrick was rushed to a private military compound. The government denied involvement. Langley was arrested trying to cross the Canadian border under a false identity. 3 others on the list took their own lives. And 2 senators went silent, their social media scrubbed, their offices locked down. But I wasn't done. I had one last place to visit. Their original Elmsworth facility. It was hidden deep in the Colorado Rockies, shielded under a research foundation called Novacin, a front for psychological grants and behavioral labs. Maddox, who I hadn't heard from in weeks, sent me coordinates through a burner email. If you want to bury the monster, go to its grave. I drove for hours through snow and dirt roads until I found the entrance, a rusted service gate half buried in pine needles and frost. The facility was still active, dim lights buzzed inside, equipment still hummed, but it wasn't staffed by scientists anymore. Just silence, empty beds, observation rooms frozen in time. One of the screens in the control room still looped old footage of me as a girl, sitting still, twitching, slightly murmuring nonsense into the dark, and then from the back room a voice. You should have stayed quiet, Brielle. Barrick, slower, but still alive, still protected. He stepped out holding a pistol like it was a pen, confident, practiced, careless. You think the world gives a damn about you? He spat. They'll forget this in a week. You'll be another broken headline. The system survives because it's built to forget. I raised my gun. I didn't come here to be remembered, I said. He laughed. You don't have the stomach for this. You're just a girl, someone else's experiment. Do you really think justice works without violence? And I replied, you taught me that it doesn't. I pulled the trigger. The gunshot echoed through Elmsworth like thunder through a cave. Barrick dropped instantly, the pistol falling from his limp hand. I stood over him for a moment, watching the blood soak the tiled floor where so many children had been rewired, erased, repurposed. I should have felt relief I didn't just still Masai found the mainframe in the basement, burned it, torched every backup server, took the last hard drive, and drove 5 miles out before tossing it into a frozen lake. When I returned to the motel in Boulder, I found an email waiting from Maddox. It's done, I'll disappear now. You should too. They'll look for a scapegoat. Let them find a ghost. I didn't respond. I booked a flight to Prague under the name Eliza Creed, left my old phone behind, and disappeared into the world. 6 months later, Elmsworth was officially declared a rogue program by a private security audit team. Government disavowed all knowledge. Some people were arrested, others cut deals, most walked free, but the files? They're still out there. Copies exist in places even I don't know. Monica made sure of that. As for me, I'm not the same girl anymore. I don't have all my memories. I don't know how to love without fear. I don't sleep much, but I know who I am now. I'm Brielle Cross. Was silenced. Now I echo in places they can't erase. Thanks you for watching this video. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. This story is written and edited by Dark Lifeside Diaries.